سوا على الهوا سوا على طول سوا على الهوا يأتيكم عبر أثير إذاعة
صباح الخير أمريكا
من يوم اللي اتكون يا وطني الموج كنا سوا.
يمكنكم الآن متابعة برنامج سوا على الهواء على قناة ميوزك لايف عبر الديش نتورك شانل 633. البرنامج يبث لمستمعين يوم الثلاثاء الساعة 8 صباحا حسب التوقيت الشرقي للولايات المتحدة في ميشيغان وتوليدو وأوهايو ووينزر كندا على الموجة المتوسطة wnzk 690 AM، ولمستمعين في مناطق واشنطن وفرجينيا وميريلاند على الموجة المتوسطة wdmv 700 AM. يمكنكم الاستماع للبرنامج عبر الاتصال من أي هاتف على الرقم 702-489-0120. يتلقى البرنامج اتصالاتكم مباشرة من داخل الولايات المتحدة على الهاتف رقم 248-557-3300. الإضافة عبر سكايب US Arab Radio. للاستماع للبودكاست ushammedia.com.
Today's program is brought to you by the Ziyad Brothers.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
Welcome everyone to Sawa al-Hawa. We are together on air. I'm your host this morning, Renee Ahi, with a most interesting and important program. My guest today is Dr. Susana Flores, a clinical psychologist at Arizona State University and the author of a fascinating book titled Face Hooked. Yes, you got that right. Face Hooked, How Facebook Affects Our Emotions, Relationships, and Lives. She is a noted speaker and trainer. Dr. Flores holds a master's degree in counseling from Loyola University and her doctorate in clinical psychology from the Illinois School of Professional Psychology in her hometown of Chicago. Today's show will discuss the impact that social media, including Facebook and Twitter, have had on the way we think, communicate, interact, and understand each other and ourselves. Dr. Flores, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me on your show.
My pleasure. Dear listeners, we invite you to ask Dr. Flores questions during the show. I'd like to give you that phone number now. It's 248-557-3300. Today's show will be entirely in English. And Dr. Flores, we do again welcome you from all the way from Arizona. It's kind of early there, so we're delighted that you are up and awake and being with us, and you're heard all over the world. Can we talk a little bit about this book? And your book deals with some very pretty serious and dangerous effects of what started out, as I recall, a means to stay in touch with those we care about. Please tell us what inspired your book.
Well, I have always been fascinated by the way that we communicate and interact. Obviously, I'm in the psychological field, and so I find Facebook and Twitter and all the main social media platforms to be very powerful in that we have the way to communicate in a way that we've never been able to do before. We could reach someone on the opposite end of the globe in a matter of seconds. But with that power comes responsibility. I think the main, there were several things that inspired the book aside from just being fascinated by this new power that we have. I was in private practice in Chicago, and I began to notice a new dynamic in my clients' presentations, which was social media. So I began noticing interpersonal conflicts, either due to political differences or relationship jealousy, stalking behavior, passive-aggressive behavior in friendships, and my colleagues began wondering, what's going on, right? And so began to predict that this is going to be a huge clinical shift in our clients' presentation, And sure enough, the problems began becoming more frequent and more varied. And so I was toying with the idea of a book, but I'd never wrote before like this. And but I was talking about it all the time. And my friends were trying to tell me, like, you should just write it. And I was like, well, I'm not a writer, but we'll see, And then finally, I had a client, actually, I think 3 total, that I had to assist with a hospitalization because of interactions that were so toxic on social media. One in particular was, a couple in their 40s. They were 3 months away from getting married, and the men's, my client's coworkers, just told him that he needed to log on to his fiance's profile immediately. So she changed her relationship status from engaged to in a relationship with, and substituted his name and profile picture for that of his best friend. So
Oh, my
basically,
goodness.
she was announcing to the world, including him, that she was having an affair with his best friend. So this is how he found out.
How
And
devastating.
yeah, it was horrible. And so he asked for an emergency session, and we met. And I'm very rarely speechless, but my mouth just dropped at this. And so his phone, even during session, it was just ringing off the hook. So his mother, her mother, his cousins, everybody. They had many mutual friends, so everybody knew about this even before he did, because he was working. So he mentioned that he just couldn't, he didn't feel like he could go on, and we thought that it was in his best interest to just get an evaluation at a hospital. And I've never witnessed anyone so enthusiastic, or so motivated, I don't want to say enthusiastic, but motivated to go into a psychiatric unit, take my phone, take my laptop. He just wanted to be unwired. And later on, when he confronted her, she said, yes, we've been an item for about, 4 months now. It was time to let you know. And the only thing I could think of was on Facebook, right? And another client had his cousin post a photograph of a car on fire with the caption, my aunt and my uncle were in there. And so that's how he discovered that his parents died.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Car crashed very, very close to their home. And so I could hear him screaming in the background. His wife was calling me, and so he had to be hospitalized. He couldn't tear himself away from the keyboard. Now, those are 2 very extreme circumstances. The third hospitalization involved a father that had shot his son in the leg because he wouldn't get off of social media.
Okay, I just am in shock with the violence, the seriousness of what is being done by Facebook and Twitter, and these were not supposed, I don't think they were supposed to be intended to do harm.
No. What the original version was, from Harvard with Mark Zuckerberg. It was just supposed to be a platform to meet people and as a form of entertainment, but it became incredibly addicting. Right, and so as mentioned, these are extreme cases. This doesn't happen every day, but people are reporting problems and increased levels of depression and anxiety. So we were not supposed to be as hooked as we are, or as we have become, nor were we supposed to get into political battles or lose friendships over, this. And basically, it's the nature of the platform that just encourages us to share more than we would normally share in a public forum, and to battle more on digital medium.
Why is
And
that
so
the case, Doctor? Why do you think that this is encouraging the worst of us to come out?
Well, when let's take politics for example. When these things are literally in your face, because you're addicted to them, you tend to check Facebook a lot, and so you're seeing all of these messages, and they offend you, right? And then so people feel compelled to say something, right? And people feel more prone to just get nastier because there is this illusion that I'm not causing the same amount of harm as if I told this to your face. But the reality is that you are. Because, in my book I talk about how the computer screen has metaphorically morphed into a shield to protect us from backlash. And the keyboard has morphed into a bridge between our every thought in the world. And so we're becoming, if not we've become, programmed to share more, because it's almost like a diary, right? And there's this validation, external validation drive that we have. Please like my post. And most of us do it, even those of us who think that we don't. Like how many of us will type in a post and then we press delete, 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 right? And we correct it until we believe that it's acceptable enough to get enough likes. So that's self-editing. We're editing who we naturally are because we're becoming performers. And our friends are no longer our friends. Our friends are our audience.
That's a very different approach to interpersonal relations than we've had in the past. Ladies and gentlemen, we're joined this morning on Sawa al Hawa by Dr. Susana Flores, and if you have any questions for her regarding this situation that the world is in, not just us in the United States, regarding our social media, please call us at 248-557-3300. And Doctor, you were talking about the computer as being kind of a screen or a, does it connect us or does it disconnect us?
Oh, that's a very excellent question. In my book I mentioned how, the movement of our time before, it used to be like, I think, therefore I am. And in today's world, it's I connect, therefore I am, right? And so we are certainly more connected, but it's very likely that we're more lonely or lonelier than we've ever been because we're detached.
Yes.
We're communicating through this medium, and it gives us, once again, I'll use the word illusion a lot in this interview. It'll give us this illusion that we're as connected as we need to be, but we're not. See, we're humans, right? And humans need to embrace and interact through our five senses. We need to, smell, the quintessential of roses, right?
Right.
And we have to feel, the embrace of our lover's arms, and we need to, just hear someone's laughter live. We just have to have a presence. The presence of a physical human being next to us is very different than communicating online. And so when I try to tell my clients, you form this relationship with this person that you don't quite know, you're falling in love with an avatar. And they always give me a weird look, right? And they're like, no, this is real. And I said, well, it's edited and embellished and a created illusion. Now, part of the person is there, of course, right? It's
right.
Self-expression.
Sure.
But it's not really the person because this is the person that they want you to see. Like I did charity work, I'm taking care of my elderly clients, or our elderly parents, and so you're only getting a snippet of a person, and it's I think ultimately with these platforms, they can bring out the best in us, but they can certainly also bring out the worst in us. So I would say we're less connected. We have 1,000 plus friends. Some people have 1,000 or more friends.
Right.
These are not really your friends. This is something that just blows my mind, is that people will connect to other people that they have no relationship with. They have never met them in their entire life.
Right.
And yet you are inviting them to see your children's pictures. You're inviting them to see where you work. You're inviting them to even, and some people will share their relationship details. But when you do that, you are inviting this whole party into your bedroom. This is another way of conceptualizing it.
Sure.
And there are consequences to that.
Indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, please call us with your questions at 248-557-3300 to speak with Dr. Susana Flores. We're talking a little bit about the negative side of these social media. I know that it does some good in as much as it connects us to places where we would never go. If that helps us establish relationships that we may never have had at other places in the world. Is this going on in other places in the world as well?
Everywhere. It's a global phenomenon. So this is not a U.S. phenomenon. This is everywhere. And as mentioned, there are a lot of positives, as you just pointed out. So whenever I do a presentation, I tell people this is not a get off a social media book. This is more about an awareness book, right? On how to use it responsibly and use it for good, right? It's power, once again, right? And so a way of using it for good. But so in my book, to answer your question, I started off by speaking to psychologists and then soon realized that I needed to get a bigger audience if I was really going to write this book. So it's kind of a funny story, but I in the middle of the winter in Chicago, I held up this big sign in front of my office that read, speak to me about social media. right? And I was freezing out there, but I held up the sign, and people were staring at me like I was insane. And then after a while, people began approaching me, and they started talking to me about their relationships or what it's doing, and then some positive stories as well. And then before I knew it, I had this crowd of people just wanting to talk about it. So then I started doing focus groups, and so and then I interviewed a lot of teenagers. Well, I'll hopefully speak about the teens in a bit, and the millennials. And but so then I decided to open up the questions to the Facebook audience itself. And so through my professional page and through other
social media, right?
Yes, exactly. This is the power of social media. How do you reach people, someone on, in the other side of the world? And so before I knew it, I started getting responses from everywhere. Right. I've spoken to people in, South Korea. I've spoken to people in India. I've spoken to people in Argentina, all sharing both positive, like really heartwarming and beautiful stories, and also some very tragic and frightening stories. Some, cyberbullying, like stalking behavior, interactions that just started off on social media and escalated, or it triggered anger to the point of someone coming over to someone's house and being violent, or, families fighting with each other over someone's post, or, it, and in the book I also mentioned, like, well, if this is affecting the world, and it's definitely affecting younger generations, I wonder how we're going to be communicating in the future, because, we're getting programmed, in a sense, to get used to, let's say, Twitter, 140 characters, so we have to figure out a way to express a thought in a very brief period. We're more impulsive in our communication. We are less filtered, so we just, blurt out what comes to our mind. So with this impulsivity, this lack of introspection and reflection, I worry about what this means to, people's relationships, what this means to the way that they're functioning educationally, and even globally, internationally. How are we going to be communicating with each other?
That's right.
And some people say, like, well, you're taking this out of context, like it's a little paranoid. And I said, well, is it really? Like, think about it. How often do you really pick up the phone, or do you let it go to voicemail and then get annoyed that you have voicemail instead of a text? Most of us do. Most of us do.
Well, I think that part of our problem, too, is that we've moved away from the personal interaction, learning how to deal with each other as another individual, and picked up the machine and put the machine between us and another human being. And certainly when we start our children in school, we want them to have friends, and so on and so forth, and those friends then all of a sudden become, at younger and younger ages, digital friends. Cyber friends. And I get a little worried, too, about what we're seeing in our schools. Bullying has increased tremendously, and cyberbullying. Yes. And I'd love you to talk about that. We're going to take a break in a moment, and we'll come back. And ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question for Dr. Susana Flores on Face Hooked, please call us at 248-557-3300, and we'll be back.
عندي سؤال يا جدي شاغلني ومحيرني شو يلي بيخلي زياد عكل لساني قلبي
زياد شركة قصتها عيلة عريقة بترويها منتجات أصلية جودتها بتشهد إلها إنه كبرت معنا كل بيوت تلاقيها العيلة وجيراني وأهلي ما بدوروا إلا عليها لأنه زياد يا جدي بتجيب المنتج بلدي وبتخليني أتذكر أصالة وعراقة بلدي أجود المنتجات الغذائية من عائلتنا إلى عائلتكم
سوا على الهوا سوا على الهوا يأتيكم عبر أثير إذاعة
صباح الخير أمريكا
من يوم اللي اتكون يا وطني الموج كنا سوا.
Welcome back, everybody, to Sawa al Hawa. We are together on air with Dr. Susana Flores, a clinical psychologist at the Arizona State University and author of a fascinating book called Face Hooked, How Facebook Affects Our Emotions, Relationships, and Lives. Dr. Flores, we started to talk before our break about the effect on children and what's going on in our schools and outside of our schools. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about that, because to me that is one of the more frightening things about growing up now that we didn't have, certainly when I was a kid, which was
Yes, I'm grateful.
a long, long time ago. And it's starting younger and younger, and I don't understand it. I certainly worry about our children's ability to grow into fully developed, fully critically thinking, and relationally wholesome people. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I conducted several focus groups with teens, and I was very surprised not only by their responses, but by their behavior. And by that I mean I began noticing that even, it was the greatest irony, during this focus group, their cell phones were, and it's not that different from adults too, but always within hand's reach, right, or just right around their arm area. And I noticed them staring at their phone a lot, because they were concerned that they might be missing something. And that's when I discovered what FOMO means, FOMO, an acronym for fear of missing out.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. And so they introduced me to that. It's FOMO. Dr. Flores, it's FOMO. And so some of the things that we talked about, dating came up a lot, right? And so they mentioned that this is the way that they flirt, this is the way that they meet their partners, and before they even date, they will completely do extensive research on a person's profile. And once again, this is an avatar, right? This is an illusion. So they're only seeing what this person wants you to see. So they don't. So if someone is possessive or jealous or controlling, or so they're not seeing that, but they're making an assessment, an assumption, and an assessment of who this person is based on who they are through different social media platforms. Teens certainly use a lot of different platforms, and they say Facebook is really more for adults now. However, Facebook is still the most popular, all around. And some of the things they mentioned was that, it's just a lot easier, of course, to communicate online. But they also mentioned a lot of discomfort with personal communication, direct communication. So I asked for an example, and they said, well, even as you're speaking, sometimes you pause. And then, I saw all the heads nod in agreement. And I said, yes, I pause. People pause. And they said, well, when you pause and like for more than like a second or two, like, I can't handle that. And I said, what do you mean you can't handle that? And they said, well, when you're texting somebody and there's no response, you kind of assume that they got busy or that they put the phone down or that something happened, and it's fine, right? But when there's an awkward silence and you're in person, it's very uncomfortable. And I said, well, do you feel uncomfortable with pauses in general, like this, these silences? And most of them said, yeah, on some level, it's just easier to just get an immediate reaction. So a lot of people say, like, well, or they complain of the newer generations. They're very entitled. They want everything done now.
Yeah.
I understand where that complaint comes from, but I also understand that, how they got it. So I don't really blame them.
How did they get it?
And yes, because they're used to very brief levels of communication. They're used to immediate responses. And so, like, again, if you're texting me, I expect a text back in, let's say, 2 minutes or less, right?
Right.
And if not, you'll even see people complaining, like, how are you not texting me back that quickly? And so, of course, it's going to bleed onto their other interactions. And I work at a university, and I certainly see it, like, I want this now. It's just like, well, life does not function that way.
Right.
And so we do a lot of educating on, well, this is not the way that, it is. It's because you're used to something, done immediately. Doesn't mean that other people need to comply with that. And so what my concern, I was really fixated on this pausing thing. Right. And I looked at them in one particular group, and there was this long silence, and I could see their discomfort, and I kind of did it on purpose. And I said, I'm concerned about this because, this is going to be a problem for you guys. And they said, well, why? And I said, well, if you are uncomfortable with pausing, that means you're uncomfortable with silence, right? And if you're uncomfortable with silence, that means that you're not taking moments to a moment to, like absorb
That's right, or
a
ground
moment, I
yourself.
guess,
That's
like,
right.
appreciate a moment. And you're also not taking the time to reflect and to contemplate, because you are going to need that in certain conversations. Like, one person says one thing, and you could just say, there's nothing wrong with just taking a moment to say, well, let me think about that for a second.
Well, that is
And then they
also
said,
what
well, that's weird. And I said, no, it's not.
isn't
Like,
it
you don't
also
have
what
to
we
answer immediately.
yeah. Well, isn't it also part of good listening? I mean, we must pause because and when we teach listening skills as one of the greatest things that we as human beings have to offer our others and also to offer ourselves, it flies in the face of that because we must pause. We must pause to listen. In order to
Yes.
communicate, I have to hear you. You have to hear me, or we don't have meaningful conversation. So in a way, it's almost flying in the face of how we want to teach our kids to be fully human, to absorb, to have time to think critically, to appreciate. And like as you said earlier, stop and smell the roses, because that's how we appreciate life.
Right, but my fear is that we're moving away from that. Again, we're becoming more performers, and we're seeking external validation, right? So, please tell me what my self-worth is, through your endorsement of my statements. And so that will also lead to people, listening just or hearing someone just for the sake of being able to respond, not really listening. And so that was my point with them, is like, you have to be able to take moments to reflect on something. And I said, it's not just dating. It could be speaking with your future professors. It could be speaking with your future work colleagues or your supervisor. You have to be able to listen, right? And when you do that, like, that means that you have to pause and even just have an ability towards introspection. Maybe it is me, right? If other people are giving me this feedback, maybe I need to change something. Versus, just getting other people's opinion immediately and then having other people just say, well, no, this person's wrong, and then you dismiss it, right? And so that's an example of a problem. Other things that teens are really big behavior with them. There's not a lot of loyalty in conversation. So, for example, they will take a screenshot. Like, let's say you and I are speaking about a third person, and through text, of course, everything is texting. And then I decide to tell this other person, because I believe that she should know what you said. So I will take screenshots of the texting conversation and forward it to her. And then, of course, there's an argument between you and this other person, and you confront me. How could you do that? And they said, well, it's kind of natural. Like, people understand that, the response is always like, well, you did text it, so therefore it is on you. But so then my response is like, well, but there is an assumed privacy.
Certainly.
And that leads to another topic, right? That there is no privacy when it comes to digital communication, text or otherwise. Everything is shared. That is an example of how teens think.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yes, she was texting me, but there's no privacy. There really isn't. So if you're texting it, then you have to be accepting of the possibility that this will be shared. That is a teen mentality.
That's what we also tell our young people, too, when they're going to be careful what you post, because your future employers will make a judgment about you based on what you've posted on Facebook. So that if you are looking to have a wonderful career in whatever it is, you can rest assured that the future employer is going to take a look at your profile and all of the other places where you are not private, whether it's LinkedIn and whether it's Twitter or what. They can find you. And that is something that I hope that our young people, we don't have too many of them listening at 8 o'clock in the morning, but if our parents
do.
That's right. And that was the next question. And ladies and gentlemen in the audience, if you have a question for Dr. Flores, please call us at 248-557-3300. I want to talk about parents and what we can do for our children to help them, whether they're teens, whether they're children experiencing bullying. And cyberbullying I want to talk about, because I'm seeing a whole bunch of, you used the word as we were talking earlier about addiction. So would you tell us a little bit about how we as parents can help our children use these as tools to help them connect, but not become addicted?
Yes. Well, the first golden rule for parenting on any level is to be the role model. I'm going to start there because during several focus groups, they talked about how, or teens rather, they talked about how they began missing their parents because their parents were staring at their smartphones more often than they stared at, or more often than they interacted with them. And the parents, accused the teens of doing the exact same thing, and they're like, well, she's always on it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the first rule, is to just be by example and to spend time or make efforts to make a rule that the phone goes down at dinner time, for example. Like you have to, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, this is our world now, and so we have to adapt to it, right? So a lot of parents ask me, like, how do I get my child, my teen off of social media? And they never really like my response, but my response is usually you don't, right? Like if you restrict it in your household, they're certainly going to get, access outside, either through friends, etc., because this is the way that they understand each other, and this is the way that they understand the world. However, you can certainly put rules, like if I had a lot of parents tell me that they were afraid to take away their teen's phone because they're going to get angry, and I was like, well, that's okay.
Right.
It's like they have the right to their emotions, right? But you still have the right to to enforce rules. And so you do need to spend, I know it seems like a common sense, right? But in this world, you need to have a rule of, like, the phones go down at a certain time, right? And to have those. The other thing, too, is to check your teen's privacy on their social media networks. If you don't know how to do that, then consult a friend who is IT savvy or social media savvy, because to go through the privacy steps often require. I think Facebook at one point, it was almost like I forgot how many steps, but I was counting it for the book. I think it was like 11 or something, to make it as secure can be.
Yes.
And once again, there is no privacy, but to increase that, and to increase at least a comfort level with that. The other thing is, too, is to talk to your teens about social media instead of just trying to restrict. Like, try to understand it. So, like, why do you prefer DeviantArt over Snapchat? Right? What does Snapchat do? And ask them who their friends are. Right? And then so that's also going to be important. Like, before a certain age, I fully believe that parents should have full access to the platforms. Now, once again, there's going to be, they can use aliases on other platforms that parents will not be aware of, right? Teens are very savvy, right? Very savvy when it comes to digital expression, so parents are not going to be able to cover everything.
Right.
But on certain big ones, they can certainly monitor. What scares me is when someone, is like, 12, and the parents have allowed them to have a social media profile. One, it's against Facebook rules and other platform rules, and for a reason, because they're, expressing yourself in such a public forum requires, you would think, a certain level of maturity.
Yeah,
right?
one would think.
And insight that very few 12-year-olds will possess. And so I would suggest, get involved with your teens, interactions, ask questions to understand the different platforms, consult someone about privacy rules, and also speak to school administrators to ask them what the rules on cyberbullying are.
What are you seeing in the world of cyberbullying? What is different about this bullying form, let's say, than what we've, the playground fights of old?
The playground fights, what usually happens is that, someone gets hurt, someone gets humiliated for a while, and then some other issue takes over, and so the distraction, people are distracted from, what just occurred. What happens with social media, however, is that it's magnified 10,000 times over, and it never quite goes away. And so, for example, like once it's online, it's online. And again, like, it's not just a matter of bullying. Like, people that were not involved in the bullying, or people that you don't even know, are now participating in the bullying by their commentary. And once again, like, we are meaner on digital platforms. There have been many cases of teen suicide because of cyberbullying. And one in particular that haunted me, it still haunts me, is the story of Amanda Todd, where she posted this video on YouTube with index cards talking about her bullying, and this was shortly before she committed suicide. So she had to, they had to move schools. She had an adult stalker, and he was sharing pictures of her to everywhere, and then all the teens, ganged up on her, and they physically beat her, and they called her a slut. They called her all of these other really horrible names, and she was even harassed even after her death. So there were these I hate Amanda Todd pages set up, and so the mockery continued even after her death. It was incredibly sad and disturbing. But the cyberbullying happens, and so this is also a very important area to speak to your kids about, in that, be careful what you post, because, it can carry consequences. And I firmly believe that we need more rules, more laws to prosecute people who cyberbully teens. And at the beginning, there weren't laws in place, so not only parents, school administrators, and even law enforcement, officials didn't quite know what to do, with stories like this.
Well, Doctor, let's take a break on that sobering note. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a very important topic. We invite your comments at 248-557-3300. We'll get back to this topic of how do we protect our children from bullying and cyberbullying, and we'll be right back.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products, because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
سوا على الهوا سوا على الهوا يأتيكم عبر أثير إذاعة
صباح الخير أمريكا
من يوم اللي اتكون يا وطني الموج.
Welcome back, everybody, to Sawa al-Hawa. We are together on air with Dr. Susana Flores, who is a clinical psychologist at Arizona State University and the author of the book Face Hooked, How Facebook Affects Our Emotions, Relationships, and Lives. And we were talking about the lives of our children right now. We're talking about cyberbullying, the terrible effect that it's having on our teenagers, and starting younger and younger. Doctor, how do we protect these young people from bullying? And how do we teach our own children that we are not supposed to bully? We don't abuse people physically or cyberly.
As mentioned in the previous segment, it's a matter of, awareness of different platforms and how they operate, enforcing or really restricting the privacy and as many as parents could discover each platform. And if you don't know how to do that, to consult a friend or a colleague that knows how to walk you through on helping your child in that way. Warning, just how when we grew up we learned about strangers, parents, they still need to learn about strangers. Like, you only friend people that you know personally and that you trust. And adults are very guilty of doing the same thing too, just inviting strangers into the world, into their cyber world. And also, it's the golden rule: treat people with respect, right? So you may be, let's say the cyberbullying. If you notice someone being cyberbullying, you teach them about integrity in real life. They need to learn about integrity in the digital world as well. And so you stand up to this person, or you, at the very least, do not engage in situations that, do not involve you. Because now that there are more roles at school. I'm thinking of a case in particular where, one teen, he participated in some sort of, he just made a commentary or something, and he didn't even know exactly what was happening, but because there was cyberbullying, he also got in trouble at school just for making the comment. And so he was seen just as guilty, and I agree, he was just as guilty, right? And so, there's responsibility with this form of communication. So, I think the theme is probably kindness. Like, if you communicate this way, you're not supposed to be a mean girl or a mean boy. You have to try to be kind, and to realize that if you do this to someone online, you can cause significant damage, if not even making someone suicidal, because the pain is that severe, and to remind them that they would not want this to happen to them, and so therefore they are to act differently.
Can we talk about this addiction that
Yes.
has kind of taken over our world? Yesterday when I was talking to a colleague about our program this morning, she was telling me that one of the guys who was sitting at the table with her at a luncheon during a presentation had the phone in one hand and the fork in the other.
Oh, yes.
And it was so distracting for my colleague, and wondering, okay, you came here to this event, but you're not at this event. And so yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we as adults need to monitor ourselves and watch out for our behavior, because our children are watching.
Yes.
And so is everybody
Yes.
else. So can you talk a little bit about this addiction epidemic? Where do we go? Where do we go from here?
I saw a news segment recently. I think it was Adele. Like it was her concert or so, and she actually asked the favor of the audience to put the phones down for a second so that they could enjoy the show.
Wow.
Right. That tells you something, because all she saw was cell phones, and she's like, "This, okay, you can take the video, but for at least this song, how about you just enjoy this song?" Like put the phones down.
That's why we go to live
like,
concerts, to hear the music.
Exactly. You paid for this, right? But see, that tells you our mentality, like, our mind, instead of enjoying a moment, our mind goes to, I need to share this moment, right? Or I need other people to see that I am at this place, right? And that's the external validation seeking that I'm speaking of, right? You check into this fancy restaurant, it validates your importance, and so that's an addicting factor. Aside from the validation seeking, there's been several scientific studies that, study the phenomenon of the addiction, and what they're finding is that whenever we get a like or a comment or, the push notification on the phone, the same areas, or the areas of our brain that are being triggered are the same ones as food and sex, basically.
Seriously?
We're getting we're getting dopamine hits.
Oh, my goodness.
Right? And so when people withdraw from it, and I'm using that word strategically, they experience some anxiety very similar to withdrawal, right? And so people ask me, like, how do I know if I'm addicted? And I said, well, here's a little test. See if you can go a weekend without checking social media once, even despite a push notification, right? So if your phone is letting you know someone commented on something, don't check it. Let's see if you can do that. But see, what happens is the curiosity kills the cat, right?
Right.
And you want to see what someone posted. Like, it's important to you, even though it really shouldn't be important. Like, these are supposedly your friends. They're not going to harm you, right? And so the digital expression is taking precedence over real-life experiences, right? So anyway, but if you can go 48 hours without checking social media once, you're probably okay. If you can't do it, you might have a problem. And another thing that makes it addicting, is that it's really the smartphone in general, right? If we didn't have the smartphone, I think we would be okay. Because, okay, you would be addicted to it at work maybe, which isn't that great either, but it's not that mobile, right? So you're carrying social media with you everywhere,
Right.
and it's affecting you everywhere, right? So we could be on a bus, and we're seeing tweets from Donald Trump, and we're getting outraged, or from the other side. Again, I'm not going to pick a side here, but, and then you feel the need to respond, or you feel the need to forward this. And so then you want to know what else a person said, or a politician said. And then that further fuels this need to, it reinforces the compulsion to respond. So there's, the obsessive checking, and then there's the compulsive behavior of feeling the need to respond right away. And if there's a distraction in real life, you get annoyed because you really want to get back to your phone.
Well,
So I call it kind of like the slot machine effect. When you're playing slot machines, like, you're playing, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you figure you got to keep playing, otherwise the next person, might get the money that you were supposed to get, or you feel like you could get your money back if you begin to lose money.
Right.
That's the same thing that's happening over social media, over the your news feed is that sometimes there's something interesting, sometimes there's not, but you better keep checking it, otherwise you're going to miss out, as the teens taught me, right? This is the fear of missing out.
FOM,
so,
FOMO?
FOMO.
Oh dear.
Yes.
This is a new one. This is a new one on me, FOMO. But I because it seems so addicting, and we are looking at ways to help our society get over an addiction to drugs and an addiction to alcohol, an addiction to gambling, an addiction to... How do we, you as a psychologist, how can you help us get over this addiction? Because if it is controlling our lives, then it is an addiction. If we are not able to put that drink down, or if we're not able to walk away from the slot machine, we're addicted. And living life addicted, it means that something else is controlling us. So give us some guidance, please, as to how we can become unaddicted or move away from this kind of sickness.
Well, the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual, DSM-5, for us, like, they don't have an internet addiction, disorder, but there should be. I agree that it has become a problem, especially with this recent election. We've seen, and this is where my colleagues are validating my work, right? And they're like, you were not kidding, like, this thing is driving everybody insane. And it's social media, really. I mean, well, there are other issues, obviously, right? But the social media interactions and the addiction to it, and others, psychologists are like, put the phone down, right? Or, the first step is really insight, right? And that's why I wrote the book. Again, it's not about get off of social media. I want people to be on social media. I think it's phenomenal in many ways. It's more about, like, if you are aware that something may be negatively affecting your relationships, or, if you notice that, you're stalking an ex, and therefore, that's a really good example. If you're stalking your ex, it is going to keep you from getting over him or her, right? Because you're still a part of their world. And so psychologists say it's time to block them. And it's not just a matter of unfriend, it's a matter of blocking, because you're going to check their profile regardless, because the temptation is too great. So sometimes it's a matter of deactivating your account just for a bit, and if that is too much, okay, then take little breaks, right? And even if it's like 1 hour here, 1 hour there, and just try to make an effort to just stay off of it for a little bit, and spend more time with people in real life. Because we've changed in the way that we are interacting, the time we spend together. Studies also show that we're physically spending less time together.
Yes.
It's important to make that effort. So you must call your friends and you say, okay, I'm going to have a dinner party, or let's hang out and let's do this. People aren't doing that anymore. Remember how often people would say, oh, let's go to this place or let's go to that. Statistically, we're not interacting, and we are social beings that function out of the five senses, right? And so we have to, for our own mental health, we have to interact socially in real person. So it's not just okay to just hang out with your friends on social media. If it's their birthday, if it's a friend, call them. It's a mind-blowing idea, right? But because of the convenience, this is the way we're being programmed. We just say, happy birthday, exclamation part, a couple of emojis, done. My obligation is finished, right?
Yeah.
No,
it's
it
not.
isn't.
No.
No.
And one, Doctor, I'm going to ask you to hold on for this that thought, because we would like to take a break, and then we have Jerry, who's called in with a question for us. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to call with your questions to Dr. Flores, 248-557-3300. Stay with us. We will be back together on air in a moment.
عندي سؤال يا جدي شاغلني ومحيرني شو يلي بيخلي زياد عكل لساني قلبي
زياد شركة قصتها عيلة عريقة بترويها منتجات أصلية جودتها بتشهد إلها إنه كبرت معنا كل بيوت تلاقيها العيلة وجيراني وأهلي ما بدوروا إلا عليها لأنه زياد يا جدي بتجيب المنتج بلدي وبتخليني أتذكر أصالة وعراقة بلدي. أجود المنتجات الغذائية من عائلتنا إلى عائلتكم.
سوا على الهوا سوا سوا على الهوا يأتيكم عبر أثير إذاعة
صباح الخير أمريكا
من يوم اللي اتكون يا وطني الموج.
Welcome back, everybody, to Sawa al-Hawa. This is Renee Ahi, your host, and I'm joined by Dr. Susana Flores, a clinical psychologist at the Arizona State University and author of the book that we're discussing today, Face Hooked. Yes, Face Hooked, that we are hooked on Facebook and other social media, how Facebook affects our emotions, relationships, and lives. And Dr. Flores, we have on the line Jerry. Jerry, good morning. Welcome to the show again, and it's good to talk with you.
Thank you, Ms. Renee Ahi. Thank you for taking my call.
It's a pleasure.
Habba. And good morning to your guest, Dr. Susan Forrest. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
The
How are you?
topic is very important, and I wish if you guys could talk about it more and more. I'll be very greedy to hear some talk about it in 10, 12 program next talk show. I would appreciate, because everybody like to hear this, which bring a lot of benefit to our communities.
Oh, well, thank you.
Doctor, my question is that during the presidential election, the American House split in two half for Republican, Mr. Donald Trump, and half for Ms. Hillary from Democratic. And to be honest with you, Doctor, I could see it in my eye, and I felt it. There was in a family strong supporter for Donald Trump, strong supporter for Hillary Clinton. And after the election, I saw the reaction. There was a daughter against her dad. There was a son against his mom, because somebody picked up Donald Trump as the president, somebody. So how do we deal with this, doctor, as a psychology, and this? How do we treat to cure this gap in the family? And this didn't happen in one house. This almost in the whole United States of America. And how we going to accept the result of the presidential voting to receive a new president in January 20th. Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Jerry, for calling.
Merry
It's
Christmas.
a very interesting question, Dr. Flores.
It is. This election year has boggled the minds of many people, and how to begin this? I was. I'm trying to be as objective as possible, because obviously everybody has an opinion on this election. But what I found was, I did an interview with someone from the Chicago Tribune on Donald Trump's Twitter expression, and studied his sharing strategies. And so I mentioned this just to kind of give an idea that he does have a strategy with how he was mobilizing masses. And he is a social media master. Like him or hate him, he knows what he's doing. And even with my friends, I noticed there was a lot of backlash, how could you say he's good at this or something? It's well, he is. But, he even said that he won this election because of Twitter. And I agree. I think that, what he was saying was outrageous, and, on many levels. Again, I'm sorry if someone is a fan, but some things were outrageous, right? But see, that is what mobilized people to respond. So usually whoever wins an election, especially a U.S. election, is whoever gets the most attention, usually, even negative attention. So it has caused, a lot of backlash and a lot of arguments. And once again, it's because you have a certain period of space to express yourself. And the social media platforms leads to miscommunication, because you may upload a link when you're outraged. You're reading something, you're uploading a link, you think it's true. Some are true and some are false. There was a lot of fake news feeds with this particular election, and that begins the spiral down of the arguments. And so during Thanksgiving, first of all, after this election, many psychologists were very busy with clients that were panicked or frightened and scared, and we were validating, yes, there's a lot of reasons for that, because it was inciting a lot of violence as well, and hate crimes. But what we were saying is, once again, developing the rules, you have to take a stand against some of these things, right? And so if you feel that, you want to do something, then it's time to be proactive. It's not just about expressing on social media is important, but then you also have to do something about it, right? and this will help you emotionally to feel that you're doing something to cause change. Again, regardless of whatever side you are, it's important to be proactive. The other part, what saved Thanksgiving, and hopefully what will save other holidays like New Year's, etc., is to, the parents in particular, or the matriarchs or the patriarchs, to set these rules. We are not discussing politics over this holiday season. And
that's always been the case, Doctor, whether there was social media or not.
True.
You don't talk about politics or religion at a family gathering.
Absolutely. And what we say is nothing brings out family drama more than, weddings, funerals, and holidays, right?
Right.
And so a student brought in this flyer that his grandmother made, right? And so she posted it outside the door, no politics allowed. And so he brought it to me because he thought I would enjoy it, which I did thoroughly, right? And he said, Grandma, save Thanksgiving. And so I said, did people abide by it? And he's like, well, so, some tried. And she quickly said, no politics or leave, right?
Wow.
And then so
good
it
grandma.
was very, very good grandma, right? Like, this is the time for us to reflect on this year and to make changes for next year. And, it's also important for us, regardless of what side you were on, to also remember that these are your friends, right? And so it was a very heated, emotional election. And, even for myself, I had to remind myself, well, I certainly don't agree. I don't know how this person has this view. I thought I knew them, right? But they're also being fueled by these messages, but they're still a good person. So to try to remember that, and also what also helped a lot of people was to give social media a break. So whenever they would see something from Hillary or Donald Trump, just skip it, right? It's important to be informed, but you can control how much access of the negativity you're going to expose you and your family to.
Well, Doctor, one of the things that we're concerned about, and I know that Jerry represents our community, the Arab American community suffered a lot during this election and the cycle, and there is legitimate fear in the community.
Absolutely, there is. Absolutely.
And those kinds of talk on social media have fueled a lot of actions in real life, not digitally.
Absolutely.
And so people have very, very strong opinions of that. And so I think if you can understand his concern and mine as well.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I do. My family's Mexican, right? And I said, this election was it was against the M&M. It was Muslims and Mexicans. That's all we heard, right?
Yes.
And so, no, I felt it also on a personal level, and you could already tell what side I'm on, right? But the fear was absolutely real. And what I did, right, this was the step that I took, is that I explained what privilege means, right? And privilege means that you're able to wake up the day after the election without experiencing fear or panic or dread. That's what privilege means. So don't tell me, and don't tell, Arab Americans that they have nothing to be afraid of.
That's right.
Or that their fear is unfounded. You have no right. You don't understand what that means if you've never been discriminated against. And so, there were statements made like, punch him in the face or do this or do that or, we're going to have registration or et cetera. But you have a voice too. I have a voice. You have a voice, right? And so, what we, my husband and I said is if they force people to register, then we're registering as Muslims too because that's not right.
No.
And you can make a stance.
Right.
And, this is where it's important to, again, it's a balance of you can determine how much of this you're going to, if it's negative, and a lot of it was, you may not have control over what's happening politically right now that the election is over.
Right.
But then ask yourself, what do I have control over? And some people, non-Muslims have been going to mosques with signs, we love you. We are all Americans.
We're all Americans.
We embrace you. And, it actually even makes me choked up now. That's a step that someone can take, right?
Well, unfortunately, we have to take the step of interrupting you, Doctor, because our hour together on air is concluding. And I can't thank you enough, Dr. Susana Flores. If you are willing, we'd love to have you back to continue this conversation as we move into to next year. And thank you, everyone, for listening to Sawa al-Hawa. I'm Renee Ahi, your host. I wish you all a Merry Christmas. Thank you, Dr. Flores, and thank you for your wonderful question, Jerry. Bye-bye.